And when regulations are issued by the Stock Exchange and the Securities and Futures Commission, the company actively follows up on them and studies them, doing everything we can to satisfy the demands of the commissioners. I think this is the major change for our company.
我觉得呢，其实公司上市之后呢，那么你就是
There is a big change after listing, from being a solely owned corporation to being a multi-shareholder corporation with shareholders from around the world. This involves a very important conceptual shift, as all the decision-making has to be based on benefits to the company and to all shareholders. The management has to grasp this concept. In our company's case, we are an international transportation and logistics company. Through listing, strategic investors, professional investors, and a lot of well-known international investment funds became shareholders. Therefore, the most drastic change in our company has been increasing internationalization. We now take some of the best international companies in our industry as our standard. We emulate their level of corporate governance. Through listing, we benefited a great deal. Through communication with our investors, we can share in their knowledge of the industry. The knowledge we've gained internationally has really benefited our own development. First of all, to be listed means that some shareholders will come in to attract new investors. We want to find some good shareholders and good investors. This is very important for the development of the company. These investors agree with the strategic development of the company, and they are willing to purchase the company's stock at a higher price. That's the market we're looking for. This kind of market usually demands a higher level of corporate governance. If the level of corporate governance improves, financing costs will be reduced. Under the supervision and support of good investors, in the long run, the company will have a steady development. There is a great effect on mainland enterprises. We enter a completely new legal environment when we go from China to Hong Kong, Singapore, the States, anywhere. The requirements for the company and the directors are unfamiliar, and that's the biggest problem. We need to get advice from lawyers and professional consultants. In the case of Hong Kong, there are amendments to the securities rules, and some of the content of the listing rules has to be legalized. We don't think this is a major change, though. For example, we already had to follow chapters 13 and 14 of the listing rules. Even if they aren't laws, we still need to follow them. So this change won't put a lot of pressure on us. Actually, there is one thing. Mainland enterprises differ from local enterprises in their methods of management and business modes. That means the structure of their internal organization and corporate governance differs from Hong Kong. So, under the new rules of corporate governance, where companies are required to give explanations if they don't follow the rules, some flexibility is provided, and we really welcome this. We can consider unifying the situation in our company and which mode we would like to use. The most important point is that corporate governance is not our objective. Rather, the result of corporate governance is developing the business of the company. The key is that we develop a culture of good corporate governance that conforms with the laws and rules. This is a good development for the long-term continuation of the enterprise, and that's why corporate governance doesn't put a lot of pressure on us.
I mean, the exchange does produce some statistics on this issue and has its own working definition. Clearly, we've seen a shift in recent years to an increasing number of companies that are coming to the Hong Kong market having a mainland connection, and the proportion is over 50% as of today. Well, I think our general philosophy is to create a level playing field in respect of all the issues that we deal with. Now, in individual circumstances, there can be different issues or challenges that need to be faced by those companies. And in some cases, they may look for some dispensation from the rules, some modification of the rules that addresses particular issues that they have. And we are always amenable to listening to what they have to say, thinking about the purpose of the rule, and seeing whether there are alternative ways of achieving the same effect, but that those don't necessarily result in strict application of the rules. I mean, clearly there are challenges in regulating companies that are either based outside Hong Kong or have management or operations outside Hong Kong. I think if we look at it in a global perspective, it is a bigger issue for Hong Kong than many other markets because of the high proportion of companies that fit in to this category.
I think what we have is that Hong Kong, well, if you go back 3 years ago, I can remember sitting on the great debate and the sort of the chattering classes and journalists, you know, to what extent would Shanghai wipe out Hong Kong? Was this sort of Chicago-New York relationship? Was it a Toronto-New York relationship with sort of Shanghai blossoming, Hong Kong becoming marginalized? And of course, the last 3 years has been a very different history from that. We've seen Hong Kong thrive as a capital market, and we've had a prolonged bear market in Shanghai and the domestic stock markets. So we've had two markets emerge. We've seen the best companies of China come down to list here, to a great extent apply the best qualities of governance, whereas in the domestic markets, with a few exceptions, perhaps companies like Baosteel, which are certainly best in their class, we have a second-tier market. So I think there's profound differences between Hong Kong and China. I think, and whilst we don't at the newspaper devote the same coverage to the domestic markets company by company, stock by stock, simply because of the lack of capital account convertibility and direct availability of A shares to our readers, I think certainly the quality of, of governance, of disclosure, whilst improving, there remains tremendous differences.
That's all we have time for today. In today's program, we have followed China's growing corporate governance awareness as it makes the difficult transition to a market economy. While China has introduced bold regulatory reforms, having the rules in place is clearly only a first step. Ensuring compliance with those rules will involve the much longer-term task of cultivating the corporate governance culture in the mainland. Mainland companies with listing overseas are playing a critical role in the dissemination of corporate governance values in China. They have had to make the difficult transition from state-owned entities to publicly listed companies with international standards of corporate governance. In the next episode of Corporate Governance in Action, the final in this series, we will be looking at issues of ethics.